You're listening to Solihull Radio.
That's right, you are listening to Solihull Radio. We have our first ever #Solihull stories to deliver to you today, and I'm joined in the studio by an amazing lady, local lady, lived in Solihull pretty much all of her life, apart from a couple of years out that she was telling me about earlier, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But her name is Liz Mulrey, and she has come into Solihull Radio to start the Solihull Stories section off here on a Friday night show. And we're going to talk through your amazing journey over the last sort of 10, 15, 20 years. And hopefully you'll be able to tell us exactly what's going on, and we can listen to this story and perhaps learn a little bit about you and about what's been going on. So Liz, thank you very much for coming in. Are you well now?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah.
Excellent stuff. Right, so Liz, where did it all start and what are we talking about today?
Well, it all started a long time ago, and we are talking about adoption, and but particularly as an older mom and a single mom.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you say a long time ago, I'm not going to pry into how, ages and years and things like that, but tell us where it began. So you're talking about adoption for you as a single mum.
Yeah.
And when did you decide to adopt?
Well, when I was in my 40s, I kind of woke up to the fact that I hadn't got any children, and I couldn't believe it, and I didn't know. I was in a panic, and I didn't know what to do. And eventually, I decided that I could adopt. So I approached an adoption agency and went through training. And we are talking of, a good long while ago now. And during the training, I kind of heard a few things. I was the only single adopter there, which I don't think which is not unusual. And and I heard things about a single adopter perhaps being offered a child who might have more problems, say, because most of the children at that time went to couples, and that sort of frightened me, I suppose, if I'm honest, and I decided that maybe I didn't have the strength at that time to carry on, so I gave up on the idea at that point. Yeah. Okay.
And were you working at the time as well? So you were trying to balance adoption and a job?
Yeah, I was working at the time. Yeah, full time. And I planned to get adoption leave and things like that. I knew that was available to me. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. So for the first time that you tried, you went through all the training, and then, for want of a better phrase, and I apologise if it offends, you kind of bottled it a little bit, didn't you? And yeah. You said, no, I'm not doing this at this moment. And this was when you were in your 40s.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to develop the courage and the determination and the will to go, right, now I am ready? What was happening in your life at the time?
Well, it continued to be there in the back of my mind, and having woken up to not having any children, it didn't go away, of course. And so it was there, and one day I was reading the You magazine from the Daily Mail, and there was an article in there about a woman in her 50s, and then I was in my 50s.
Okay.
And how she'd adopted an older child. And, a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, yeah, an older child. And I guess I've never been the baby person anyway.
Right.
And I thought, yeah, that could be fun. And this woman had adopted a 10-year-old, and it was a very positive article, and it just made me think, wow, I could do that. It really inspired me to carry on then. So then I started to get back in contact with adoption agencies and see who would take me on.
Right, and that was locally in the Solihull area? Or did it go further afield?
It was a bit further afield, Birmingham and Solihull. And I guess, understandably, my age probably was a factor in it not working out, and I can't remember the exact details, but either way, it didn't really work out. And I've never been a person who's been driven for things, but every time I got a knockback, I just couldn't stop myself but go through, the telephone book or get on the net and find somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And I was looking through the local paper and I saw an advert for Coventry adoption services, and there was an evening meeting for potential adopters, and I just put that in my diary and thought, right, I'm going to that. And I remember the evening very well. It was a very rainy November evening, and I don't know Coventry, and I didn't know where I was going, and I know I went up a few one-way streets and whatever.
The wrong way?
Yeah. I really was in a panic, and I couldn't find this place. And then eventually I found it, and I was late, and I burst through into these doors, and there must have been about 200 people there, and I couldn't believe it. And almost from the moment I arrived, a couple of ladies that were at the door sort of said, "Oh, don't worry, have a seat, have a cup of coffee." Yeah. And almost immediately I got this feeling that this was going to be it. And I know you're meant to be honest when you've been turned down by an adoption agency. So when at the end there was any Q&As, I went up to this lady and said, sort of spurted it all out. I've been rejected by blah 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 and blah blah blah, and she just looked at me and said, well, what have you got to offer? And I suddenly thought, oh great, it's not about what I haven't got, it's about what I might have. And I knew driving home that day that if I did it, I was doing it with them. They were the right people, and that proved to be right, because I did go on to adopt, and I had a lot of support afterwards as well, and it made a big difference, and they were the right people.
Okay, so could I ask, how old were you when you took on your young person?
Well, I might have been 55.
You might have been around that sort of age.
Yeah.
And how old was your young person when you 8?
Yeah.
Okay, so boy or girl? Girl. And tell me about that process, because I'm not completely familiar. Is there a few meetings and then they work out how you all get on with each other?
Yeah. The lady, the social worker who was my social worker for going through what at the time was called Form F, I think, and we, lots of chat about my life and everything. She used to be this little girl's social worker, and she'd sort of swapped from being that side of the adoption process to helping with the potential adopters. Right. So she knew this little girl, and she asked me if I would consider her before I considered any other child. And I had such respect for this woman, and she had been so helpful to me, that I thought, yeah, okay, I will. And she gave me the particulars, and I just decided, yeah, that was what I was going to do. And then I met my daughter for the first time, and over a period of 10 days you get to know that child, and during that time she could and I could back out if we just had this instant dislike of each other. And during that time, you can't explain these things, just, I don't know, a bit of magic, but we just got each other. We just had a laugh, and yeah, I knew I wasn't going to back out, and she didn't. And so 10 days later, she moved in. Yeah.
Wow. So all in the period of, under 2 weeks, you'd been there, you'd met your daughter for the first time, you started to develop that relationship with her.
Yeah.
And then straight away she's
Yeah.
pretty much living in the house.
Yeah.
And this is
Yeah.
age 8.
Yeah.
So you're age 8, so you're thinking year 3, year 4 into primary school.
Yeah.
And you are now responsible for getting her to and from,
Yeah.
and all of those sort of responsibilities. So how did your life change suddenly in under 2 weeks?
Well, obviously, complete change. And I entered a world that I wanted to enter. I wanted to walk up to the school holding a hand, and that sounds romantic, and it is. But I wanted all the things that have come with that as well. The angst, the worry, the arguments, but equally, all the really amazing things that come with being a parent. And it was, I was tired of my old life. I had a lovely time, but I was tired of all that going out, and I just wanted to give something to somebody else. I wanted a family, and I thought there's somebody out there who wants a family or needs a family. And so I really enjoyed all the things that maybe other people find irritating. It was because it was all so new to me. And the other thing was, in a freaky way, I found being older helped. I really relished it, and I still kept up my work part-time, and work can be a distraction and a good thing to get your head out of various things, but it was a joy really to be in this other world.
Okay, so you've gone through the primary school phase, and you've started developing a relationship with your now daughter.
Yeah.
And moving forwards, how long ago was that? How old is your daughter currently?
She's 16 now.
Right,
yeah.
so 8 years ago we're talking this happened. And 16, we're in a transitional period for her, because it's that time, isn't it? 16-year-olds in their education and in life in general. So how have you found that transition yourself over the last year or so? Tricky, or are you able to support? Well, I'm sure you are, but how have you found it?
It's if I'm honest, we struggled very hard at first. I don't know. I'm not sure 100% why, but we did. We had a lot of support from the social services, post-adoption support, and I think without that, we may not have made it. But when we came through that, people used to say to me, "Oh well, wait till Sam's a teenager and stuff," and I thought, well, yeah, I'm sure there are things to come, but I think I feel like we've almost had those struggles already. And I think to an extent I was right on that, in as touch wood, that we haven't struggled with the teenage years too much really. There have been issues, but they're not to do with us or the teenage years. They're to do with Facebook and social media and contact with other people really, that have come, outside influences, shall we say, that have come in, that has caused problems. That's
a big issue now for most young people, isn't it? The social media side of things. It's definitely changed over the last few years, hasn't it? Much more pressure on them.
And also people can contact people, search for people, find people, and before you know it, you've got a whole extended family out there sort of in your life that you weren't expecting.
Sure.
So that can be problematic. Okay,
so we're up at 16 now. You're obviously enjoying it still, and you know, it was a life-changing moment when you decided to go with the Coventry people, and obviously their support got you through those initial stages, and the social worker was on the ball enough to know exactly who to recommend. Yeah. What advice, going back now, okay, imagine you were 15, 20 years old now. What would you say as a 15, 20-year-old to yourself if you could give that little bit of advice now looking back in your life? Have you got any ideas on what you would say?
Yeah, I think I've always been quite a timid person. And I think I've not been very good at taking leaps of faith or following my dreams, or, you know, those kind of things. And I think when I was driven to carry on with the adoption, I did take a leap of faith. I did step out of my timid mindset. Admittedly, I was driven to do it by this waking up suddenly to not having children, and that was the best thing I ever did. So I would tell my 15-year-old self to be bolder, stronger, have faith in what you feel when everyone's telling you, are you mad? To have faith, and if you keep going, things do happen. You do meet the right people. You do have to keep going, but it's almost like a test. You have to keep going, and hopefully, and in my experience, it can work out. Excellent.
And what a wonderful positive way to finish your story about late life adoption.
Yeah.
Has it helped you coming in to start the Solihull Stories packages off? Is this something that... Because effectively you came up with some of these ideas, didn't you?
Well, I do think reading an article inspired me. Yeah. And if I hadn't read that, I don't know if I would have done the adoption. I do think, hearing other people can spark inspiration, and it's also cathartic to tell a story. Yeah. And I know from the troubles that I've had during the times that hearing about other people and reading about other people, and you think, oh, you're not alone. There are other people out there in the same situation or similar, and I just think it can make you feel connected to other people as well. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for coming into the studio today. And I can't thank you enough for telling your story here on Solihull Stories and late life adoption. And if you want any more information, I'll put some links on the solihullradio.com website to some of the late life adoption websites and the adoption agency websites as well. That may help other people.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in today, Liz. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
You're listening to Solihull Radio.